On the very morning of my engagement, when the hall was already filled with soft lights, the clinking of glasses, and the hum of guests waiting to congratulate me, my phone buzzed with a notification that silenced my entire body. My uncle had tagged everyone, every cousin, every aunt, my parents, my sister, in a group of beach vacation photos. I blinked at the screen in disbelief as strangers around me began to whisper. There they were, all of them, standing in bright sunlight, cocktails raised high, smiling in coordinated swimsuits with the caption that burned like fire through my chest. Family first, always. And in that moment, I realized, on the one day that was supposed to prove I belonged, they had already chosen to erase me. I stood frozen with the phone in my hand, the laughter of guests fading into a dull roar in my ears as I stared at those, images of my family grinning on a white, sandy beach. The words family first twisted in my gut like a cruel joke, because here I was, alone, wearing the dress I had chosen so carefully, waiting for the people who had promised to support me on the most important day of my life. My fiancé leaned in, trying to steady me, whispering that maybe it was some kind of mistake. But I knew better. This was no accident. My uncle had tagged them all proudly, making sure the world knew that the family had chosen their beach trip. Over my engagement, and worse, they had broadcasted to everyone who followed them online. Guests around me kept asking quietly, "Where's your mom? Where's your dad?" And I had no answers. My cheeks burned, but I forced myself to stand straighter, hiding the quake in my voice as I thanked people for coming. Inside, though, I could feel something tearing open. This wasn't the first time they had done something like this. My family had always known how to twist the knife with a smile, but today they had gone further than I ever thought possible. My mind flashed back to the countless small humiliations, birthdays where they forgot to show up, dinners where my sister was celebrated and I was invisible, the endless remarks about how I should be grateful for whatever scraps of attention I got. And now, on the day that was supposed to cement my future, they had chosen to announce to the world that I wasn't worth showing up for. I swallowed the lump in my throat, determined not to cry in front of people who were here to see me shine. But my chest felt like it was cracking. What stung most wasn't their absence. It was the fact that they were together, united, smiling, while deliberately leaving me out. The contrast was unbearable. I was in a room full of people, yet I had never felt more abandoned, more unwanted. And at that moment, I decided I would not let them destroy me again, not this time. When I tell people my family skipped my engagement to go on vacation, they think it must have been some misunderstanding, like maybe the dates clashed or there was some emergency. But the truth is, this wasn't about timing or money, it was about control. My parents, my sister, even my uncle, they always believed that I should play the supporting role in everyone else's life story. Growing up, it was clear my sister was the golden one. Every recital, every minor accomplishment, she was showered, with gifts and posts that made her look like a superstar. Me, I was the quiet one, the reliable one, the one they called when they needed something done, but never the one they celebrated. When I brought home good grades, my dad would say, "Well, that's expected. You've always been the studious type." When my sister barely passed, they threw a dinner in her honor just to lift her spirits. I used to swallow the hurt and tell myself it didn't matter, that one day they would see me. But standing there on my engagement day, I realized they had no intention of ever seeing me. The weeks leading up to the engagement should have been joyful, but they were filled with tension. I had begged them to RSVP, to at least let me know they'd be there. My mother kept saying, "We'll see. We're looking at dates for a family getaway." I thought she meant later in the year. My father brushed me off, saying, "Don't put pressure on us. You know how stressful planning is." My sister smirked when I mentioned the ceremony and said, "Well, not everything is about you." I thought she was joking, but now I know she meant every word. The cruelest part is that they knew how much this meant to me. I had sent them the invitations, chosen the venue that could fit them comfortably, and even picked a date that wouldn't interfere with my sister's work schedule. And yet, they picked that exact week to book their vacation. As I scrolled through the beach photos, I noticed the details that made my stomach turn. Matching straw hats with Family Trip 2023 embroidered on them. My sister in the center. of every picture like it was her celebration, my parents smiling wider than I had seen in years, arms around each other, as if this was the event of a lifetime. And the caption, "Family first, always," felt like a knife aimed straight at me. Because what they were saying wasn't just that they chose themselves, it was that I wasn't family at all. I kept replaying all the times I had given in to their demands. The time I drained my savings to help my sister pay her rent, even though she'd spent her money on vacations. The endless errands I ran for my parents, missing my own deadlines just so they could relax. The times I let them talk over me, diminish me, erase me, because I believed one day they would show up for me the way I always showed up for them. But here I was, staring at evidence that they never intended to. And the cruel irony was that strangers, guests who barely knew me, were the ones offering comfort, telling me I looked beautiful, while the people who should have been my biggest supporters were clinking glasses on a beach, celebrating without me. In that moment, I knew. Something had shifted inside me forever. This wasn't just neglect, it was a declaration. And I promised myself, right there under the sparkling lights of the engagement hall, that I would no longer beg for a place in a family that thrived on excluding me. The night dragged on like a cruel test of endurance. And though I forced myself to smile for photos and accept congratulations, I could feel the heat of embarrassment crawling up my neck every time someone leaned in and asked softly, "So, your parents couldn't make it?" I wanted to vanish into the floor, to escape the pity in their eyes. But I refused to let the shame show, so I smiled harder, laughed louder, and poured drinks for people as if nothing was wrong. Inside, though, my heart was hammering because I knew what those pictures meant. This was intentional. My uncle, who had always been the family instigator, made sure to tag me too, as if to remind me that I was watching from the sidelines while they enjoyed their perfect family vacation. My fiancé squeezed my hand under the table, whispering that I didn't need them, that we could build something stronger together. But part of me still ached with the question, why wasn't I worth it? Later that night, when the guests had gone, and the hall was quiet, I scrolled through the posts again, every picture like salt in an open wound. I saw my parents building sandcastles with my cousins, my sister posing dramatically against the waves, my uncle filming toasts on the beach. While everyone laughed, glasses raised. I realized it wasn't that they had simply chosen to miss my engagement. They had chosen to replace it with their own celebration, one where I was deliberately excluded. That thought sank heavy in my chest as I remembered the countless times I had canceled my own plans to show up for them, the birthdays I had thrown for my sister when no one else cared, the nights I stayed up with my mother when she was sick, the loans I quietly gave my father to keep his business afloat. And yet here they were, repaying me with public humiliation. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the ceiling, my engagement ring catching the light, and for the first time, I felt the cold clarity of knowing that this was no longer about disappointment or oversight. It was about power. They wanted me small, invisible, always on the outside looking in, and they wanted the world to see it too. That night, something hardened inside me, a quiet resolve that I would no longer chase people who celebrated. My absence louder than they ever celebrated my presence. The following morning, I woke up with puffy eyes from holding back tears all night, and I told myself I wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing me crumble. So I got dressed, walked into work with a straight back, and when my coworkers asked about the engagement party, I lied through my teeth saying it was perfect and intimate and just what I wanted, while inside I kept replaying those beach photos like a punishment reel. My phone buzzed constantly with notifications from relatives who hadn't been invited to the trip, but had seen the posts, sending me messages like, "So sorry, honey, they really did that on your day?" And, "Unbelievable, I can't imagine." How that must have felt. Each ping reminded me that my humiliation had gone public, and that was exactly what my uncle wanted. Because he loved to stir the pot, loved to make me the butt of the family's unspoken jokes. A part of me wanted to call them, to scream, to demand why they thought this was okay. But another part of me knew the script too well. They would turn it back on me, call me dramatic, say I should be grateful they even posted about family at all, that I was too sensitive, that I was always the one causing tension. I could almost hear my mother's voice. "You're exaggerating. It's not that deep. We'll celebrate with you later." Later. Always later. And later never came. That night, I showed the pictures to my fiancé again and he looked at me with such seriousness that I knew he was done watching me be their scapegoat. "You don't owe them any more," he said firmly. And for the first time, I believed it. I thought about all the years I had carried the weight of being their reliable one, the problem solver, the stand-in whenever something went wrong, and I realized I had been mistaking obligation for love. Because love doesn't post photos of everyone but you and call it family first. Love doesn't erase you on your biggest day, and the more I sat with that truth, the more a new idea began to take shape in my mind. If they wanted to show the world that I wasn't family, then I would. Show the world what it looked like when I finally stopped being their safety net. I stopped answering their calls. I stopped liking their posts. I stopped rushing every time they needed a ride or a loan or a shoulder to cry on. And at first, the silence felt unbearable, like I was holding my breath underwater. But then I noticed how quickly peace began to creep into my life when I wasn't constantly cleaning up after their messes. My uncle sent me a text saying, "You're being childish. We didn't mean anything by it," as if public humiliation could be brushed off with a shrug. And my sister went further, posting a story with the caption, "Some people always make themselves the victim," clearly aimed at me. The old me would have crumbled under the guilt, scrambling to explain myself, but this time I didn't take the bait. I stayed quiet, and that quiet spoke louder than anything I could have said. Weeks later, my parents showed up at my door unannounced, arms crossed and faces tight, telling me I had no right to punish them with distance, that family forgives and forgets, that I was overreacting. I looked at them standing in my doorway, these people who hadn't even bothered to dress for my engagement, and I felt a strange calm wash over me. I realized that for the first time in my life, I wasn't the little girl begging to be noticed. I was a grown woman drawing a line in the sand. I told them clearly, "You made your choice when you raised a glass to each other instead of showing up for me. I won't keep pretending that didn't happen." They sputtered, trying to twist the story, but I shut the door and sat back down, at the table with my fiancé, who simply reached across and squeezed my hand. And that night, as I scrolled through my phone, I deleted every trace of their vacation posts, every reminder of their betrayal, and replaced them with pictures from my engagement. Me in my dress, me smiling, me surrounded by the friends and loved ones who actually showed up. It was the first time I had ever curated my life around who was there instead of who wasn't, and the shift felt like freedom. Months passed and the distance only grew wider, and though at first they tried to guilt me with messages and half-hearted apologies, eventually the tone changed to anger, calling me ungrateful and cold for not letting them back in. But by then, I had already built a life that no longer revolved around chasing their approval. I poured my energy into planning my wedding with people who had proved they cared, friends who showed up with open hearts instead of excuses, and every detail became a quiet rebellion, choosing vendors without asking for their opinion, designing invitations that didn't include their names, arranging seating charts with no empty spots reserved for people who had already chosen a different life. When word got around that I hadn't sent them invitations, my sister exploded online with a rant about how I was tearing the family apart. But the irony was obvious to everyone else. They had excluded me first, and the only difference now was that I refused to pretend otherwise. On the day of my wedding, as I stood in the mirror fastening my earrings, I felt a lightness I had never known before, because for once I wasn't waiting for anyone to show up and validate me. The people in that room were there because they wanted to be, not because of obligation. And as I walked down the aisle and saw my fiancé waiting with tears in his eyes, I knew that the family I was creating would never weaponize love the way mine had. Later, when photos of my wedding filled social media, I noticed the silence from my parents and sister. They didn't dare comment, didn't dare tag or share, because deep down they knew they had written themselves out of the story. And in that silence, I found peace. Because I finally understood that family is not the people who share your blood. It's the people who show up when it matters. And I would never again waste my life begging to be chosen by those who had already proven I wasn't their choice. As the years went on, I kept that promise to myself and never looked back. And though they tried to reinsert themselves at convenient moments, my mother calling when she needed money, my father hinting about health scares to pull me back in, my sister demanding I attend her baby shower as if nothing had happened, I stayed firm, and each refusal felt like reclaiming another piece of myself they had stolen over the years. The more I pulled away, the clearer the pattern became. They weren't hurt because they missed me. They were hurt because they had lost control, because I was no longer the daughter and sister who dropped everything to serve them. I heard from distant relatives that they complained about me constantly, saying I had turned selfish, that my husband had brainwashed me, but those same relatives would also quietly message me saying they admired the strength it took to walk away. And every time someone said that, I thought back to that night of my engagement, standing alone in a crowded room, staring at those beach photos, and I realized that was the moment I was reborn. They thought they were humiliating me, but what they really did was hand me the clarity I had needed all along. My life without them became brighter, fuller, calmer. I celebrated holidays with friends who treated me like family. I traveled without worrying about their approval. I built traditions with my husband that felt sacred because they were ours alone. And though sometimes the ache of what I lost tugged at me late at night, I would remind myself that what I lost was only the illusion of family, not the real thing. The real thing was sitting across from me at dinner, holding my hand when life got hard, showing up for me without question. And with that realization, the anger I once carried turned into something softer. Not forgiveness, but acceptance. The kind that lets you move on without bitterness, because you know you finally set yourself free. On the morning of my wedding anniversary, years after the engagement that changed everything, I woke up to sunlight streaming through the window and the quiet sound of my husband making coffee in the kitchen, and I thought about how different my life was now compared to the girl I had been back then, desperately waiting for her family to prove she mattered. Back then, I would have given anything for their attention, would have bent myself into 1,000 shapes just to earn a seat at their table. But now I finally understood that the table was never built for me in the first place. They thrived on control, on comparison, on keeping me small so my sister could shine brighter, and I had spent years believing their version of me was the truth. But when they chose a vacation over my engagement, when they tagged the world to announce that I wasn't worth showing up for, they unknowingly handed me the evidence I needed to walk away without guilt. That single act exposed the foundation of our family for what it was: shallow, performative, conditional, and it freed me. Over time, their attempts to return grew weaker. My mother's voice on voicemail grew more brittle, my father's messages shorter, my sister's rants more desperate. But I stopped replying, not out of cruelty, but because I no longer felt the need to explain myself to people who had never listened. They had made their choice, and I had made mine. I built a home filled with laughter that didn't sting, with holidays where no one kept score, with dinners where love was not rationed out based on who deserved it most. I discovered that life without their constant criticism was lighter, that silence was better than conditional love, that peace was worth more than pretending. Sometimes people ask me if I regret cutting them off, if I miss having parents to call, or a sister to lean on, and I tell them the truth. I miss the idea of family, not the reality I was given. And when I look at the life I've built, at the husband who has never once made me feel invisible, at the circle of friends who show up for me without hesitation, at the quiet mornings where I feel safe in my own skin, I know I chose correctly. Because family isn't defined by blood, it's defined by presence, by loyalty, by the people who stand beside you when it matters most. So no, I don't regret it. On my engagement day, my family made their statement loud and clear, and instead of letting it destroy me, I used it as the beginning of my freedom. They said family first, always. But what they didn't realize was that I was finally ready to put my own family first, the one I chose, the one that chose me back. And if that makes me selfish, then I'll wear that title proudly, because selfishness has never felt so much like survival.